Story number 1. The Iceman. I've always been drawn to the legends that whisper through the winds, tales that linger in the cold shadows of forgotten places. Growing up in Minnesota, I was no stranger to the biting winters and the eerie stillness that comes with the heavy snowfalls. But none of the frostbitten nights compared to the stories surrounding the Iceman, a ghostly figure said to roam the dense forests during the harshest of winters. It was a particularly frigid December when my curiosity about the legend pushed me to seek out the truth. My friends often dismissed the tales as mere folklore, stories spun to scare children into staying close to home. But for me, they were an invitation, an unexplored mystery waiting to be unraveled. Armed with my camera, a sturdy flashlight, and a notebook filled with local lore, I set out to find the truth behind the chilling legend. The story of the Iceman dates back to the late 1800s, a time when Minnesota was still wild and untamed. According to local accounts, a man named Elias Thompson was a seasoned trapper who ventured deep into the wilderness to provide for his family. One fateful winter, a brutal blizzard swept through the region, trapping Elias in the unforgiving cold. Days passed without rescue, and despite his resilience, Elias succumbed to the elements, his body never found. Since that tragic night, townsfolk reported sightings of a spectral figure wandering the forests during snowstorms. Described as a man clad in tattered winter gear, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light, and his laughter echoing through the trees, the Iceman became a symbol of the wilderness's unforgiving nature. Some believed he was Elias's spirit, forever searching for warmth and companionship in the endless winter. I arrived at the edge of the forest just as dusk began to settle. The sky painted with shades of crimson and violet. The trees loomed tall and silent, their branches heavy with snow. The air was crisp, each breath visible as a fleeting mist. I followed the narrow trail that led deeper into the woods, the crunch of snow under my boots the only sound accompanying me. As night fell, the temperature plummeted, and the darkness seemed to swallow the forest whole. I set up my small campsite near a fallen log, the area surprisingly sheltered from the wind. Wrapping myself in layers, I began to document my surroundings, capturing the serene yet haunting beauty of the snow-covered landscape. Hours passed in silence until the first gust of wind stirred the stillness. It was then that I heard it, a distant, melodic laughter that seemed to dance on the wind. Playful yet laced with an underlying sorrow. My heart raced as I strained to locate the source, the sound growing louder and more distinct with each passing moment. I grabbed my flashlight, its beam piercing the darkness as I moved towards the sound. The laughter led me to a clearing, the moonlight reflecting off the pristine snow, casting an ethereal glow. There, at the center of the clearing, stood a figure that sent chills down my spine. It was the Iceman, his presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. He stood tall, his coat tattered and covered in frost, eyes shimmering with a cold, unearthly light. His face, though partially obscured by shadows, bore the unmistakable features of sorrow and longing. The laughter ceased abruptly as he turned to face me, his gaze penetrating my very soul. Lost in the cold, are we? His voice echoed, a haunting melody that resonated through the night air. I swallowed hard, my mind racing with fear and fascination. Are you Elias Thompson? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded slowly, a melancholic smile playing on his lips. I wander these woods, forever searching for what I lost. I took a cautious step forward, my camera trembling in my hands. Why do you linger here? Can't you find peace? Elias's eyes softened, the sadness within them deepening. The winter took more than just my life, took my family, my purpose. I remain, bound by the memories and the cold that stole everything from me. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, swirling the snow into a mesmerizing dance around us. The atmosphere grew thick with an otherworldly presence, the boundary between the living and the dead feeling impossibly thin. I felt an inexplicable connection to his plight, a desire to help ease his eternal suffering. Is there a way to help you move on? I asked, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. Elias looked down, his gaze drifting towards the snow-covered ground. Perhaps, if you can bring warmth to this frozen land, maybe I can find peace. I pondered his words, understanding that his anguish was intertwined with the relentless cold that plagued the forest. How can I bring warmth? The winters here are unforgiving. He extended his hand, palm open and inviting. There is an old cabin, hidden deep within these woods. Inside, you will find the remnants of my past, photos, letters, memories left behind. Bring them to me, and maybe, just maybe, I can find the closure I need. Determined to help, I nodded. I'll find the cabin and gather what you need. Elias gave a faint smile, his form beginning to shimmer like ice crystals in the moonlight. Be careful. The winter holds many secrets. I set off into the night, guided by the flickering light of my flashlight and the lingering presence of the Iceman. The forest seemed to shift around me, paths changing and trees rearranging in a bewildering maze. Time felt distorted, minutes stretching into what felt like hours as I searched for the elusive cabin. Just as despair began to set in, I stumbled upon a hidden path veiled by overgrown vegetation. Following it, I found the cabin nestled between two towering pines, its wooden structure weathered and covered in snow. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing an interior frozen in time, dust-covered furniture, faded photographs on the walls, and scattered papers that told the story of a life abruptly halted. I meticulously gathered the items Elias had mentioned, each one a tangible connection to his lost world. As I worked, the air grew warmer, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. I felt a sense of purpose, knowing that these memories could finally bring peace to a restless spirit. With the items in hand, I made my way back to the clearing, the first light of dawn breaking through the trees. The sun's rays began to melt the frost, casting a golden glow that seemed to breathe life into the frozen landscape. Elias stood waiting, his presence now radiant with a gentle warmth. I have what you asked for, I announced, holding out the photos, letters, and mementos. He took them slowly, his fingers brushing against mine with a touch that felt both cold and comforting. As he examined the memories, his eyes glimmered with gratitude and a hint of hope. The oppressive cold began to lift, replaced by a soothing warmth that enveloped the clearing. Thank you, Elias whispered, his voice filled with genuine relief. With these memories, I can finally let go. A brilliant light enveloped him, and I watched in awe as his form dissolved into the morning air, leaving behind a sense of peace that I had never felt before. The forest, once shrouded in eternal winter, now seemed alive with the promise of a new beginning. As I stood there, the legend of the Iceman transformed from a haunting tale to a story of redemption and closure. I realized that some spirits linger not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to be remembered and understood. By honoring his memories, I had helped Elias find the peace he so desperately sought. Driving back to town, the snow had already begun to melt, the harshness of winter giving way to the gentle embrace of spring. I felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that I had played a part in easing the suffering of a lost soul. The legend of the Iceman would forever hold a special place in my heart, a reminder of the thin line between our world and the next, and the power of compassion to bridge the gap. In the days that followed, I shared my experience with the locals, hoping to shed light on the true story behind the haunting. The community welcomed the truth, finding solace in knowing that Elias Thompson was no longer a restless spirit but a soul finally at peace. The forests of Minnesota, once feared for their chilling legends, became a symbol of hope and remembrance. Every winter since, as the first snowflakes begin to fall, I think back to that fateful night. The echoes of Elias's laughter no longer carry a haunting sorrow but a heartfelt gratitude. And whenever the winds howl through the trees, I'm reminded that even in the coldest of winters, warmth and understanding can thaw the deepest of sorrows. The Iceman's legacy lives on, not as a ghostly apparition to be feared, but as a testament to the enduring human spirit and the power of memory. His story serves as a beacon for those who seek to understand the mysteries that lie beyond our world, reminding us that every soul deserves to be remembered and every legend holds a truth waiting to be uncovered. Story number 2. The House of Cold Lights. I've always been fascinated by abandoned places, the way they hold onto secrets, their silence echoing stories of lives once vibrant but now long gone. So when I heard about the House of Cold Lights in Vermont, my curiosity was instantly piqued. Nestled deep within the dense woods, this dilapidated structure was infamous for the eerie blue glow that emanated from its windows on cold winter nights. Locals whispered tales of a family brutally murdered within its walls, their spirits forever trapped in the frigid embrace of that haunted abode. It was a particularly harsh December when I decided to explore the house for myself. The winter air was biting, each breath a visible plume in the darkness as I made my way through the snow-laden forest. Armed with my camera, voice recorder, and a sturdy flashlight, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The stories I'd heard were enough to send chills down anyone's spine, but I was determined to uncover the truth behind the legends. The path to the house was barely discernible, obscured by overgrown vegetation and thick layers of snow. As I trudged forward, the weight of the cold pressed down on me, my gloves numbed despite the layers I wore. The woods were eerily silent, the usual sounds of nocturnal creatures replaced by an oppressive stillness that seemed to watch my every move. After what felt like hours, I finally glimpsed the house through the trees. It stood solitary and menacing, its once grand facade now crumbling and covered in ivy. The windows glowed with a faint, unnatural blue light, casting ghostly reflections onto the snow around it. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached, the air growing colder with each step. I reached the front door, its wood warped and splintered from years of neglect. Taking a deep breath, I pushed it open, the hinges protesting loudly in the silence. The interior was shrouded in darkness, the only illumination coming from the eerie blue light filtering through the broken windows. Dust hung thick in the air, particles dancing lazily in the beam of my flashlight. The living room was vast, with remnants of furniture scattered haphazardly across the floor. A grand piano stood in the corner, its keys yellowed and silent. As I stepped further inside, the temperature seemed to drop even more, my breath now a constant mist in the cold air. I set up my equipment, placing the camera on a tripod and adjusting the voice recorder to capture any unusual sounds. Minutes passed in uneasy silence until I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on the snow outside. My heart skipped a beat as I looked towards the windows, the blue light flickering ominously. Then, a whisper carried through the air, faint and indistinct, yet undeniably present. "Help us!" I froze, trying to steady my racing heart. The whispers continued, growing slightly louder, though still impossible to discern clearly. I reached for my flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness as I scanned the room for any sign of movement. Nothing. Determined not to let fear get the better of me, I decided to explore further. Moving towards the hallway, I noticed that the blue light seemed to follow me, dimming and brightening in sync with my movements. The walls were lined with old portraits, their subjects' eyes seeming to watch me as I passed. As I entered the master bedroom, the temperature plummeted to near freezing. My breath came in sharp gasps, the cold seeping into my bones. The room was dominated by a large four-poster bed, its sheets torn and hanging limply. In the corner stood the grand piano, its lid open as if someone had just played a haunting melody. I approached the piano, my fingers itching to capture any sign of paranormal activity. Suddenly, the room was filled with the soft sound of piano keys being pressed, a melancholic tune that resonated through the empty space. My flashlight flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls as the music played on, though no one was there to perform it. "Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The music stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of a door slamming shut somewhere in the house. I spun around, flashlight beam darting towards the source of the noise. But the hallway remained empty. My heart raced as I grabbed my voice recorder, speaking into it with shaky hands. "If there are spirits here, please, show yourselves. I mean no harm." The response was immediate and chilling. A chorus of indistinct whispers, growing louder and more urgent. The blue light intensified, swirling around the room in an otherworldly dance. I felt a presence, a cold hand gripping my shoulder, pulling me towards the hallway. Panic surged through me as I tried to break free, but the grip tightened, forcing me to turn and face whatever haunted the house. Standing before me was the apparition of a man, his form icy and translucent, eyes glowing with a desperate sorrow. Behind him, the figure of a woman appeared, her presence equally spectral and heart-wrenching. "We were lost in the storm," the man whispered, his voice echoing with the weight of untold grief. "Trapped. Alone." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized the truth behind the legend. The spirits of the murdered family were still bound to the house, unable to find peace in the endless winter night. Determined to help them, I reached out, my hand trembling as I offered a gesture of peace. "What can I do to help you find peace?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. The woman stepped forward, her eyes hollow yet filled with longing. "Remember us. Share our story. Let the world know our suffering so we are not forgotten." Understanding dawned on me. I needed to honor their memories, to ensure that their tragic fate was not lost to time. I nodded, feeling a deep sense of responsibility wash over me. As dawn broke, the first light of day began to melt the lingering frost, casting a warm glow through the windows. The blue light faded, and the apparitions of the man and woman slowly dissolved into the morning air, their expressions now peaceful and free of sorrow. Exhausted but fulfilled, I left the house of cold lights, the heavy silence of the forest now replaced by the gentle sounds of a waking Vermont morning. My camera and voice recorder captured the essence of that night, the evidence of the spirit's presence clear and undeniable. In the weeks that followed, I shared my findings with the local community, ensuring that the story of the family who had perished in the brutal winter storm was told and remembered. The House of Cold Lights became a symbol of remembrance and a reminder of the enduring bonds between the living and the dead. Every winter since, as the first snowflakes begin to fall, I think back to that night in Vermont. The echoes of the piano and the whispers of lost souls serve as a haunting yet hopeful reminder that every life has a story worth telling, and every spirit deserves to find peace. The House of Cold Lights no longer emits its eerie glow, but its legacy lives on in the hearts of those who remember and honor its tragic history. And so, as I continue my journey as a paranormal investigator, the lessons learned at the House of Cold Lights guide me. They remind me that compassion and understanding can bridge the gap between worlds, offering solace to those who can no longer find it themselves. The cold lights of that haunted house may have faded, but the warmth of their stories continues to illuminate the path for others seeking the truth behind the shadows. Story number 3. The Phantom Hitchhiker. Winter in Wisconsin had a way of stripping the landscape down to its bare bones, leaving behind a stark beauty that was both mesmerizing and unforgiving. The nights were long, and the snow fell relentlessly, blanketing everything in a thick, silent layer. It was during these cold, bleak nights that the legend of the Phantom Hitchhiker resurfaced, a tale that both intrigued and unnerved the locals. I had always been a skeptic when it came to ghost stories, growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. I had heard countless versions of the same tales, yet nothing could have prepared me for the night that changed my perspective forever. It was late December, and the snow was coming down harder than usual. I was driving home from a late shift at the diner, the roads slick and barely visible under the heavy snowfall. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and making the car creak in protest. I was tired, my eyelids heavy from hours behind the wheel. But the thought of slipping up on these treacherous roads kept me focused. As I navigated the narrow highway that cut through the dense woods, my headlights caught a faint figure standing by the roadside. It was a young girl, no more than 16, her coat buttoned up to her chin, and her breath visible in the freezing air. She stood motionless, her eyes fixed on me, a silent plea for help etched into her expression. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to stop. The weather was bad enough without adding a potential accident to the mix. But something about her presence felt urgent, compelling me to pull over. "Need a ride?" I called out, slowing the car to a stop a safe distance away. She nodded, a small, trembling gesture. I rolled down the window, the cold air rushing in, causing my cheeks to sting. "Hop in," I said softly. She climbed into the back seat, her face pale and eyes hollow, reflecting the dim glow of the dashboard lights. The heater worked overtime, but it couldn't chase away the chill that seemed to seep into the car from the outside. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the crunch of snow under the tires and the distant howl of the wind. I stole glances at her in the rearview mirror, noticing the way her eyes darted nervously to the side, as if expecting something or someone to appear. "Where are you headed?" I finally asked, trying to break the tension. She hesitated before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just need to get home." I nodded, understanding the desperation that comes with being stranded on a snowy night. The highway ahead was a familiar route, leading directly to her home, just past the old frozen bridge that spanned the river, a structure that had been the site of a tragic accident decades ago. As we approached the bridge, the road narrowed, and the snow piled up higher on either side. The bridge loomed ahead, its icy surface reflecting the ghostly blue hue of the streetlights. It was here that the stories began. Tales of a young girl who had lost her life in a snowstorm in 1950, her spirit forever wandering the roads in search of help. I glanced at her again, noticing the way her gaze seemed to fixate on the bridge, her eyes distant and filled with sorrow. "Almost there," I said, attempting to reassure her. Suddenly, the car shuddered violently as we hit a patch of ice, sending me skidding slightly. I fought to regain control, the car sliding precariously towards the edge of the bridge. My heart raced, adrenaline surging through my veins as I struggled to keep the vehicle steady. "Stay calm," I urged, my voice tight with fear. "I've got you." But the car continued to slide, the snowy banks rushing closer with alarming speed. I reached for the steering wheel, my knuckles white from the grip, and fought to steer us back onto the main road. Just as it seemed we might come to a stop, a blinding flash of light engulfed the car, followed by a deafening silence. When my vision cleared, the girl was gone. Panic set in as I realized I was alone, the car dangerously close to the icy edge. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant sounds of the storm. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and focused on driving safely across the bridge. The rest of the journey was tense, every sound amplified in the freezing air. When we finally reached her home, I pulled over, the snow still falling in heavy flakes. I turned around, hoping to see her waiting in the back seat, but the seat was empty. A chill ran down my spine as I recalled the stories, the phantom hitchhiker, a ghostly figure forever searching for a way home. As I stepped out into the snow, I felt a presence beside me, a cold breeze that seemed to whisper through the trees. "Thank you," a voice echoed softly, carried by the wind. I looked around, the empty road stretching out before me, the bridge now a silent sentinel in the night. A sense of sorrow and loss washed over me, the realization that I had encountered something beyond my understanding. The legend was true, and I had been fortunate enough to witness it firsthand. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the image of her hollow eyes and the ghostly light that had enveloped the car. I spoke to others who had experienced similar encounters, sharing our stories and finding comfort in the shared understanding of the supernatural. The phantom hitchhiker was more than just a tale to scare children. She was a lost soul, forever bound to the frozen bridge, searching for solace in the cold Wisconsin winters. Winter eventually gave way to spring, and the snow melted away, revealing the scars left behind by the storm. Yet, the memory of that night lingered, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the next. I continued my drives, always keeping an eye out for the faint glow of a figure standing by the roadside, hoping to offer a ride to another lost soul in need of help. The legend of the phantom hitchhiker remained etched in my mind, a testament to the enduring human spirit and the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. And every time the snow begins to fall, I remember that night in Wisconsin, the night I encountered the ghostly girl and realized that some stories are rooted in truth, waiting to be discovered under the cover of a winter storm. Story number 4. The House of Cold Lights. Winter in Alaska was more than a season. It was a relentless force that shaped the very soul of the land. The snow fell thick and heavy, blanketing the vast wilderness in a pristine, white silence that seemed to mute even the most persistent of sounds. It was during one of these harsh December nights that I decided to seek out the truth behind the legend of the House of Cold Lights, a mysterious snow shack that appeared and vanished amidst the blinding blizzards, leaving behind only whispers and unanswered questions. I had grown up hearing stories about the shack from the locals in our small Alaskan town. They spoke of a time long past, when an elderly man named Elias Winters had lived there with his family. The Winters were known for their hospitality, often welcoming travelers caught in the unforgiving winter storms. But one fateful night in 1950, tragedy struck. A monstrous blizzard descended upon the region, cutting off all routes to and from the town. The Winters were never seen again, and the shack was abandoned, left to the mercy of the elements. Over the years, numerous accounts emerged of a solitary snow shack appearing out of nowhere during intense snowstorms. Witnesses described seeing a warm, blue light emanating from within, and some even reported encounters with an elderly man who invited them in for shelter. Yet, by morning, the shack had vanished, leaving behind only a set of footprints leading into the empty expanse of snow-covered wilderness. Skeptics dismissed the tales as folklore, while believers insisted it was the restless spirit of Elias Winters, eternally seeking to help those lost in the storm. As a paranormal investigator, I was drawn to such mysteries. The idea of uncovering the truth behind the House of Cold Lights was irresistible. Armed with my camera, voice recorder, and a sturdy pair of snowshoes, I set out on the night of the first major blizzard of the season. The wind howled like a living creature, and snowflakes danced in frenzied spirals, reducing visibility to mere feet ahead of me. My breath came in sharp, visible puffs as I trudged through the deep drifts, each step a battle against the biting cold. Hours passed as I navigated the treacherous terrain, the landscape a monochrome sea of white stretching endlessly in every direction. The storm raged on, relentless and unyielding, but I pressed forward, fueled by a mix of determination and the thrill of the unknown. Just as exhaustion began to set in, a faint, ethereal blue glow appeared through the blizzard, a beacon in the midst of chaos. My heart quickened as I approached, the outline of a small wooden shack emerging from the swirling snow. There it stood, the House of Cold Lights. It was a modest structure, no larger than a typical Alaskan snow hut, but unlike any I had ever seen. The walls were sturdy, built to withstand the harshest of storms, and the windows glowed with a soft, inviting blue light that pierced the darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I reached the doorstep, the warmth from within contrasting sharply with the frigid air outside. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling slightly from the cold and the anticipation. There was no response, only the relentless roar of the wind and the crackling of snow against the wooden exterior. Summoning my courage, I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with a definitive thud. The interior was surprisingly cozy, furnished with a simple wooden table, chairs, and a crackling fireplace that cast a warm, golden glow across the room. The blue light seemed to emanate from the fireplace itself, mingling with the flames to create an otherworldly ambience. "Welcome," a soft voice greeted me. I turned to see an elderly man standing by the fireplace, his presence both comforting and eerie. He was impeccably dressed in a woolen suit, his eyes kind yet distant, reflecting the flickering flames. His white hair was neatly combed, and his hands rested calmly on the table, fingers interlaced. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice gentle yet carrying an undercurrent of sorrow. I nodded, unsure of how to respond. I heard the stories about this place. I wanted to see if they were true. He offered a warm smile, gesturing for me to sit. "You're welcome to stay until the storm passes. It's dangerous out there tonight." Grateful for the offer, I took a seat, the warmth enveloping me like a protective blanket. As we sat in silence, the man seemed to fade into the background, his form blending seamlessly with the cozy interior. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his presence, a depth of emotion that went beyond mere hospitality. "Why does this shack appear during storms?" I asked, breaking the silence. He looked down, his gaze distant. "This house has always been a sanctuary for those caught in the fury of winter. I watch over those who seek refuge, ensuring they find safety amidst the chaos." I studied him, noting the lines etched into his face, each one telling a story of hardship and resilience. "Are you the one who disappeared in the storm of 1950? His eyes met mine, and I felt a pang of sadness. "I am Elias Winters. I still watch over this place, just as my family did. Our story was one of love and loss, bound by the unforgiving winter." The revelation sent a chill down my spine, the weight of his words sinking in. "What happened that night?" Elias sighed, a sound filled with regret and longing. "A fierce blizzard struck, more intense than any before. We tried to weather the storm, but the snow was relentless. We lost our way, and the cold claimed us one by one. I survived, but the others did not. Ever since, I have remained here, unable to move on, bound by the memories and the promise to protect those who come seeking shelter." I listened intently, the story resonating deeply within me. "Is there a way to help you find peace?" He shook his head slowly. "Our spirits are entwined with this place, forever tied to the land that took us. But by sharing our story, you honor our memories and ensure that we are not forgotten." As the night wore on, Elias shared more about his family's legacy, the love that held them together, and the tragedy that ultimately tore them apart. His presence was both haunting and heartfelt, a testament to the enduring human spirit even in the face of overwhelming loss. Exhausted but enlightened, I knew it was time to leave. "Thank you, Elias. I'll make sure our story is told." He nodded, his eyes reflecting a flicker of hope. "May your journey be safe, and may you always remember us." I stepped outside into the raging storm, the warmth of the shack lingering behind me as I made my way back through the blinding snow. The house of cold lights shimmered one last time before fading into the swirling tempest, leaving me with a sense of purpose and a story that needed to be shared. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of snow and a sky clear and bright. As I drove back to town, I reflected on my experience, the haunting yet beautiful encounter with Elias Winters. The footprints I left behind in the snow led directly to the empty expanse of wilderness, a stark reminder of the night's surreal events. Upon returning, I compiled my notes and photographs, documenting every detail of my visit. Sharing the story with the community brought both comfort and closure, ensuring that the legacy of the Winters family would live on. The House of Cold Lights became more than just a ghost story. It was a symbol of love, loss, and the enduring bond between the living and the dead. In the years that followed, I continued to investigate other legends and haunted places, each encounter teaching me more about the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. But the night at the House of Cold Lights remained etched in my memory, a poignant reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the next and the power of compassion to bridge that gap. Every winter, as the first snowflakes begin to fall, I find myself thinking back to that fateful night in Alaska. The blue light, the warmth of the shack, and the sorrowful eyes of Elias Winters serve as a haunting yet hopeful reminder that even in the coldest of winters, there is always a chance for remembrance and peace. And in honoring the story of the House of Cold Lights, I honor the lives lost to the unforgiving winter, ensuring that their memories continue to illuminate the darkness long after the snow has melted. Story number 5. The Frosty Pursuer. Winter in Colorado was always a time of stark beauty and serene isolation. The snow-covered peaks glistened under the pale sunlight, and the crisp air carried the scent of pine and cold. But there was another side to these winters, a darker, more sinister presence that locals whispered about in hushed tones: the Frosty Pursuer. I grew up hearing tales of the Frosty Pursuer from my grandfather, a seasoned trapper who knew the wilderness like the back of his weathered hand. He spoke of a colossal creature, its eyes burning red like embers in the night, and a breath so cold it could freeze anything it touched. According to him, the Frosty Pursuer emerged when temperatures plummeted, stalking the snowy forests in search of prey. While I always dismissed these stories as folklore, a part of me couldn't help but feel a lingering unease whenever winter arrived. It was the first week of December when my skepticism was put to the test. I had ventured into the Rockies for a solo hiking trip, seeking solace and inspiration for my writing. The solitude of the mountains had always been a source of comfort, a stark contrast to the bustling chaos of city life. Little did I know, this winter would bring more than just tranquility. On the third night of my trip, a fierce blizzard descended upon the mountain pass. The wind howled like a living beast, and snowflakes whipped around me with relentless fury. I found refuge in a small, abandoned cabin nestled between two towering pines. The cabin was nothing more than a skeleton of wood and stone, but it offered some protection from the storm. As I settled in, the temperature inside dropped sharply, the chill seeping through the cracks in the walls. I lit a fire in the old stone fireplace, hoping to ward off the cold. The flames flickered weakly, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. I wrapped myself in my thick blanket, pulling my sleeping bag closer as I tried to ignore the howling wind outside. Hours passed in uneasy silence, the storm's rage unabated. Just as I began to drift into a restless sleep, a distant sound pierced the night, a series of heavy footsteps crunching through the snow. My eyes snapped open, heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps grew louder, more deliberate, as if someone or something was approaching the cabin. I grabbed my flashlight, every instinct telling me to hide or flee, but curiosity and fear kept me rooted to the spot. The footsteps stopped abruptly, and an eerie silence followed. I strained my ears, trying to discern any other sounds, but all I could hear was my own ragged breathing. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind blew through the cabin, extinguishing the dying embers of the fire. The room plunged into darkness, my flashlight flickering and then dying altogether. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone, only to realize there was no signal in the remote wilderness. Then, amidst the oppressive silence, I saw it, a faint blue glow outside the window, moving swiftly through the blizzard. My heart raced as I recognized the description from my grandfather's stories. The Frosty Pursuer. My mind screamed to run, but my body betrayed me, paralyzed by fear. The blue light intensified, morphing into the shape of a massive, hulking figure. Its eyes blazed a fiery red, piercing through the snowstorm like twin beacons of malevolence. I could feel its presence, a chilling aura that seemed to sap the warmth from the room. The creature's breath was visible in the air, forming intricate frost patterns that froze anything they touched. I mustered the courage to speak, my voice trembling. "Who are you?" The Frosty Pursuer didn't respond with words. Instead, it raised a massive, ice-encrusted hand, pointing toward the window. My gaze followed its gesture, and I saw a path of frozen footprints leading away from the cabin, disappearing into the blinding snow. I knew I had to act fast. Grabbing my gear, I quietly made my way to the back of the cabin, where a door led to a narrow trail. Every step was cautious, the snow crunching softly beneath my boots. The creature followed, his presence a constant, oppressive weight on my psyche. As I navigated the treacherous trail, the blizzard seemed to intensify, the wind roaring like a chorus of lost souls. The frosty pursuer matched my pace, its red eyes never leaving mine, instilling a paralyzing fear deep within me. My mind raced, trying to think of a way to escape or confront the entity. But logic failed me in the face of such primal terror. Hours seemed to pass as we trudged through the storm, the trail growing fainter and more treacherous. Just as I thought my strength would give out, the blizzard began to wane, the winds dying down and the snow slowing to a gentle fall. Exhausted and frostbitten, I stumbled into a clearing, the storm finally subsiding around us. The frosty pursuer stopped, its eyes still locked onto mine. For a moment, we stood there in silence, the only sounds the distant call of a winter owl and the soft crunch of melting snow underfoot. Then, slowly, the creature began to fade, its form dissolving into the cold night air until it was nothing more than a memory. I collapsed onto the snow-covered ground, my body aching from the ordeal. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the remaining clouds, illuminating the clearing with a soft, golden glow. I struggled to my feet, the weight of the experience pressing heavily on my mind. The frosty pursuer had vanished, leaving me alone in the tranquil aftermath of the storm. Weeks later, I returned to Colorado, the memories of that night haunting my dreams. I shared my story with friends and fellow hikers, but many dismissed it as a figment of my imagination, a product of isolation and fear. Yet, I knew what I had encountered was real, the embodiment of winter's wrath and the lingering spirit of Elias Winters, the man who became the frosty pursuer after his tragic death in the blizzard of 1950. Determined to honor his memory, I delved deeper into the history of the frosty pursuer. I discovered that Elias had been a reclusive figure, a man of few words who spent most of his time tending to the remote cabins scattered across the wilderness. When the blizzard hit, he was preparing supplies for a group of stranded travelers, never returning from his mission. Some believed he perished in the storm, while others thought he was claimed by the very wilderness he sought to protect. My experience rekindled the town's old legends, and I became a vocal advocate for remembering and respecting those lost to the unforgiving winter. The House of Cold Lights and the frosty pursuer became symbols of the delicate balance between man and nature, a reminder of the stories etched into the icy landscape. Every winter, as temperatures drop and the snow begins to fall, I find myself reflecting on that harrowing night. The frosty pursuer is no longer just a tale to scare children into staying home. It is a testament to resilience, sacrifice, and the enduring spirit of those who gave their lives to help others. And while the wilderness remains as beautiful and treacherous as ever, I carry with me the lessons learned from the frosty pursuer, a haunting reminder that even in the coldest of winters, there is warmth in remembrance and the promise of peace for restless souls. Story number 6. The Hellbells. Winter in Montana was unforgiving, a relentless force that transformed the sprawling wilderness into a desolate, white expanse. The snow fell thick and heavy, burying everything in its path and muting the sounds of the forest. It was during these long, silent nights that the legend of the Hellbells resurfaced, a tale whispered among locals and feared by those who dared to traverse the nearby mountains. I had grown up hearing stories about the old church on Eagle Ridge, a modest stone structure that stood alone amidst the towering pines. Decades ago, a devastating fire had consumed the church, leaving only charred remains and a haunting emptiness where once there had been warmth and community. Since that tragic night, every winter, the tolling of church bells echoed through the mountains. Despite the church's demise, more disturbingly, each time the bells rang, Someone from the nearby town would disappear without a trace. As an investigative journalist with a penchant for the paranormal, the story of the Hellbells piqued my interest. Skeptics dismissed it as mere folklore, a product of isolation and fear during harsh winters. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the legend, a truth buried beneath layers of snow and time. Determined to uncover the mystery, I decided to spend a winter night in the area, hoping to witness the phenomenon firsthand. I arrived in the small town of Frostwood on a frigid December evening, the streets empty and silent under the blanket of snow. The locals were tight-lipped, their faces etched with the weariness of enduring countless winters. After gathering some information at the local diner, I set out towards Eagle Ridge, the path leading deep into the heart of the mountains. The hike was treacherous, the snowdrifts high and the cold biting through every layer of clothing. As night fell, the temperature plummeted further, and the howling wind seemed to carry the mournful echoes of the past. I reached the base of Eagle Ridge just as the first bells began to toll, their deep, resonant chimes piercing the stillness of the night. The sound was both beautiful and eerie, reverberating through the dense forest and sending shivers down my spine. I followed the sound, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, guiding me towards the remnants of the old church. The snow-covered ruins loomed ahead, a ghostly silhouette against the moonlit sky. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, the kind that gnawed at your bones and made every breath a struggle. As I approached the site, the tolling of the bells grew louder, more insistent. The remnants of the church stood silent now, but the sound seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath my feet. I set up my camera and audio equipment, determined to capture evidence of the phenomenon. The wind picked up, swirling the snow into a frenzied dance, and the bells tolled again, their sound echoing through the desolate landscape. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted, the temperature dropped sharply, and a dense fog began to rise from the ground, obscuring my vision. Through the haze, I saw a faint, bluish glow emanating from the remains of the church. Heart pounding, I moved closer, the sound of the bells now intertwined with whispers carried on the wind. The whispers grew louder, forming indistinct words that seemed to plead for help. "Help us! Don't leave us!" I felt a presence, a coldness that enveloped me, making it hard to move. The fog thickened, and through the swirling mist, the figure of a man appeared. He was dressed in old-fashioned church attire, his eyes glowing red with an otherworldly light. His face was contorted with anguish, and his breath formed icy patterns in the air. "Why do you disturb our peace?" he demanded, his voice a chilling blend of sorrow and rage. I tried to respond, but my voice was caught in my throat, fear rendering me mute. The figure advanced towards me, his steps silent despite the crunch of snow underfoot. Behind him, the shadows seemed to come alive, figures emerging from the fog, ghostly apparitions of the townsfolk who had vanished over the years. "They never left. We're trapped here, bound by the fire that consumed us," the man continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "The bells call us back each winter, pulling us into the abyss." I snapped out of my paralysis, realizing that I needed to escape. I stumbled backward, fumbling with my equipment, trying to break free from the invisible grip that held me in place. The apparitions moved closer, their faces etched with despair, their whispers growing louder, more desperate. "Stay with us. Don't abandon us." Summoning every ounce of courage, I forced myself to run, the sound of the hell bells chasing me through the dense forest. The snow whipped against my face, blinding me momentarily as I navigated the treacherous terrain. Behind me, the figures pursued, their presence a constant reminder of the restless spirits I had disturbed. I could feel the cold closing in, the oppressive darkness pressing down on me. Every step felt heavier than the last, my breath ragged and my body trembling from exhaustion and fear. Just when I thought I couldn't go any further, the snow began to lighten, the path ahead illuminated by the faint glow of the rising sun breaking through the storm clouds. Bursting through the final line of trees, I collapsed onto the snow-covered ground, gasping for breath. The tolling of the bells faded as I distanced myself from Eagle Ridge, the morning light banishing the remnants of the night's terrors. Shivering uncontrollably, I looked back one last time, the ruins of the church barely visible through the thinning fog. The experience left me shaken, a profound sense of sorrow lingering in my mind. The legend of the Hell Bells was real, a tragic tale of loss and entrapment that played out each winter in the unforgiving Montana wilderness. I realized that the disappearances were not random acts of nature but the desperate pleas of souls bound to the old church, forever drawn back by the haunting toll of the bells. Determined to honor their memory, I delved deeper into the history of Eagle Ridge, uncovering the story of the Winters family, the original congregation of the church. Elias Winters, the church's pastor, had been a pillar of the community, known for his unwavering faith and compassion. When the fire had erupted, trapping his family inside, Elias had attempted to save them, but the flames proved too fierce. His last act of heroism was believed to have cursed the land, binding the spirits of his family and the church's congregation to the site. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to Frostwood the following year, intent on finding a way to break the curse and free the trapped souls. I collaborated with local historians and paranormal experts, piecing together ancient rituals and spiritual practices that might offer a path to redemption. Together, we organized a memorial ceremony at the ruins of the church, hoping to provide closure for the restless spirits. On the night of the ceremony, the sky was clear, the snow pristine under the bright moonlight. We gathered around the remains of the old church, lighting candles and offering prayers for peace and remembrance. As we began the ritual, the temperature dropped once more, the air thick with anticipation. The hell bells tolled in the distance, but this time, the sound was different, less ominous, more harmonious. A soft blue light enveloped the area, and the figures of the Winters family and their congregation appeared, their expressions serene. Elias Winters stepped forward, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice no longer filled with anguish but with hope. "You have given us peace." One by one, the spirits faded, their forms dissolving into the night air as the curse was lifted. The hell bells ceased their haunting toll, replaced by the gentle sounds of the forest waking up from its winter slumber. The sense of sorrow that had once weighed heavily on Eagle Ridge was lifted, leaving behind a peaceful stillness. As dawn broke, we stood in silence, the first rays of sunlight illuminating the ruins in a warm, golden light. The legend of the hell bells had transformed from a tale of fear to one of hope and redemption. The spirits had finally found peace, and the old church stood as a testament to their enduring legacy. In the years that followed, the story of the hell bells became a symbol of remembrance and resilience in Frostwood. The once feared legend was now a cherished part of the town's heritage, a reminder of the power of compassion and the importance of honoring those who had been lost. I continued my work as a journalist, sharing the story with the world, ensuring that the voices of the Winters family and their congregation would never be forgotten. Every winter, as the first snowflakes begin to fall, I think back to that fateful night in Montana. The toll of the hell bells, once a harbinger of fear, now serves as a poignant reminder of the lives touched by tragedy and the enduring spirit of those who seek peace beyond the veil. And as I watch the snow blanket the world outside, I hold on to the hope that every story, no matter how dark, holds the potential for light and redemption. Story number 7. The Cursed Doll. Winter in upstate New York had a way of creeping into your bones, turning every breath into a visible puff and every night into an extended vigil against the cold. Our family home, an old Victorian house passed down through generations, stood solemnly amidst a blanket of snow, its creaky floors and drafty windows holding stories of both joy and sorrow. But none were as unsettling as the tale of the cursed doll that haunted our lineage. The doll first appeared in our home in the late 1800s, presented to my great-grandmother by a traveling merchant. It was an exquisite piece. Dressed in a frilly white gown with a delicate bonnet perched atop her curly auburn hair, her eyes, a striking shade of emerald, seemed almost lifelike, staring into your soul with an unsettling intensity. Despite its beauty, there was an air of melancholy about her that made us uneasy from the start. As years turned into decades, the doll remained a fixture in our home, always placed prominently on the mantelpiece in the living room. Every winter, as the first snowflakes began to fall, strange occurrences would begin to unfold. First, it was subtle objects shifting slightly, doors creaking open on their own, and the pervasive feeling of being watched. But as the winters grew harsher, so did the doll's manifestations. I was 10 years old the winter the laughter began. It was a particularly bitter season, the wind howling through the trees like a chorus of lost souls. My parents dismissed my fears as childish imagination. But my older brother, Michael, and I knew something was terribly wrong. The doll seemed to move of its own accord, never staying in the same place for long. One night, we awoke to find her sitting at the foot of our bed, her eyes gleaming in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Did you see that?" I whispered to Michael, my voice trembling. He nodded, clutching his blanket tightly. Yeah, she was right there. The following nights were worse. We began to hear faint giggles echoing through the halls, growing louder and more distinct as the nights progressed. The laughter was chilling, devoid of any warmth or joy, sending shivers down our spines. Our parents remained oblivious, too exhausted from their work to notice the escalating disturbances. One particularly cold night, the laughter reached a crescendo. I was awakened by the sound of tinkling bells, soft yet persistent, reverberating through the house. I sat up, heart pounding, and saw the doll standing at the top of the staircase, her eyes fixed on me. Before I could react, she began to ascend the steps, her movements fluid and deliberate. Michael and I watched in horror as she reached our bedroom door, pausing as if contemplating her next move. That night, we all dreamt of her. In our shared nightmare, the living room was transformed into a grand ballroom, the walls adorned with faded tapestries and chandeliers dripping with icicles. The doll stood at the center, surrounded by shadows that danced and twisted in the flickering candlelight. Her laughter echoed through the vast space, a haunting melody that seemed to seep into our very souls. "We have to do something," Michael said in the dream, his voice echoing unnaturally. I nodded, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. She's not just a doll. There's something evil inside her. When we awoke, the house was silent, the only sound the gentle patter of snow against the windows. But the unease lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness that resided within our home. As the years went by, the doll's presence only grew stronger. Our parents remained unaware, attributing the strange happenings to the old house settling or the harsh winter weather. But Michael and I knew better. We began researching the doll's origins, delving into old family records and local archives. What we uncovered was a tragic story that sent chills down our spines. Elias Winters, our great-great-grandfather, was a recluse with a fascination for the occult. Desperate to protect his family from malevolent spirits, he delved into dark rituals and forbidden practices. It was said that, in his quest for protection, he inadvertently bound a vengeful spirit to the doll, turning it into a vessel for the entity's wrath. The doll became a conduit for the spirit's anger, seeking revenge on anyone who dared to disturb its eternal winter. Armed with this knowledge, Michael and I decided it was time to confront the darkness that had plagued our family for generations. We sought the help of a local medium, a woman named Clara who had a reputation for dealing with haunted objects. Clara agreed to help, sensing the deep-seated evil that emanated from the doll. On the eve of the next winter solstice, Clara and I stood in the living room, the doll perched ominously on the mantel. Clara began to chant softly, her voice weaving through the silent house like a soothing balm. The temperature dropped sharply, our breaths visible in the frigid air. The doll's eyes seemed to burn brighter, the laughter once again filling the room. She cannot be appeased by mere words, Clara warned, her eyes locked onto mine. We need to break the bond that ties her to our family. Clara placed her hands over the doll, channeling her energy into a protective barrier. The room grew darker, shadows dancing menacingly around us. The doll began to shake violently, her laughter turning into a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the house. Michael and I huddled together, fear gripping our hearts as the spirit fought against Clara's attempts to exorcise it. Summoning every ounce of courage, Clara continued her incantations, her voice unwavering despite the chaos surrounding us. The doll's form began to distort, her eyes burning with an intense fury. "Leave this place," Clara demanded, her voice ringing with authority. "We will not allow your vengeance to continue." With a final, desperate cry, the spirit was expelled from the doll, the force of it sending a shockwave through the house. The temperature began to rise, the oppressive chill lifting as the doll crumbled into dust. The cursed vessel destroyed. Silence fell once more, the only sound our ragged breaths as we stood in the aftermath of the battle. Exhausted but victorious, Clara turned to us. "It is done. The spirit has been freed, and the curse lifted. Your family is no longer bound by the darkness that once held it." Relief washed over us, the weight of generations of fear finally lifting. We knew that the house would no longer be haunted by the vengeful spirit, and the cursed doll was but a distant memory. But the experience left an indelible mark on our family, a reminder of the thin line between protection and obsession, and the dangers that lie in tampering with forces beyond our understanding. As winter gave way to spring, the house felt lighter, the air warmer and filled with the promise of new beginnings. Michael and I continued our lives, the shadows of the past no longer lurking in the corners of our home. But every winter, as the first snowflakes began to fall, we remembered the lessons learned from the cursed doll, lessons of courage, family, and the enduring fight against the darkness that seeks to consume us. And though the doll was gone, the story of the Hellbells and the Frosty Pursuer lingered in our family lore, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unbreakable bonds that hold us together in the face of unimaginable horror.